What's up, boys? Tricks Ridiculous back with another video, and I got a new Black Panther build for you. This one is so fun. I'm absolutely loving it. It is a ranged devastating dagger sonic valor build. I know that was a mouthful. It is absolutely phenomenal. I highly recommend it. It is so fun. It is extremely good in all content. A little soft on single target damage. You can do things like Abomination and Taskmaster just fine, but you're gonna struggle maybe a little bit at the actual super adaptoid. But other than that, I mean, that's pretty common across most Black Panthers. But other than that, this is a fire build. It's so fun. The daggers are so good. Sonic as a damage type, as your primary damage, is so good, and it's a valor build. So we're going to be using our heroic. We're going to be using our range devastating daggers. We're going to be spreading elements. We're going to be stunning guys. We're going to be doing takedowns, and we're going to be activating all of our abilities nonstop. It is so fun. You can see in the gameplay in the background. I'm going to go through my normal shtick. I'm gonna bring you down through the gear pieces, through the skill tree, and then I'll leave you guys with some gameplay. I'll keep it pretty brief because it is pretty straightforward, but let's jump right into the gear. All right, boys, so here is the gear screen for this Black Panther build. So I'll start with the stats. You can see really Precision, Valor, and Resolve are what we're looking for. Even though it's a stun build, a little intensity is okay. You probably want pretty much right where I have it here. I have about 68. I would say a little more than 50, no more than 100. You get pretty diminishing returns on your intensity, and you'll see from the gameplay, even though I have pretty low intensity, it's so easy to spread elements and spread stun. We're going to be stunning people nonstop and spreading elements nonstop. We don't really need any more intensity than we already have. Resolve, I'd like to have a little more. This is a little bit of a squishy build, but it's okay. It's a range build anyway, and we're doing a lot of takedowns, so we're not really, in the fight, so to speak, so we can definitely stay a little safer. Precision, a little bit of precision. It's definitely the secondary behind Valor. We want a little bit of precision because we are going to primarily be throwing our knives, but that's not really where our damage is going to be coming from. We're going to be doing primarily stun damage, doing takedowns, and then using our heroic abilities. And of course, we're going to be getting heroic orbs back from doing takedowns nonstop, so we're going to be able to spam them as well. So therefore, Valor. We're going for Valor. And the thing about Valor too is that Valor is a crit multiplier in addition to your heroic effectiveness. So it affects your heroic abilities damage. So it's going to affect all three of our abilities, our Bass Chosen, our Spear, and our orbs, right? When we use them offensively anyway, which we pretty much will be. It's going to be doing a lot of damage with all of those abilities, but at the same time, even for our ranged attacks, we're going to have damage buff up all the time. That's consistent with all of my builds. We're going to always have damage buff, so we're always going to be critting. So because we're always going to be critting, having Valor works just fine for us. It's not as much bang for your buck as going pure precision, but I promise you it's going to work out just fine because we also get the benefit from the Valor and from the precision. We're also going to be spreading those elements as well, that Sonic, and it's so cool. You'll see in the gameplay, Sonic all over the place. All of our abilities are going to be recharging like crazy, our intrinsic recharging like crazy, spreading elements around. It's absolutely unbelievable. So definitely check that out when you get to the gameplay section. But just to go through the gear, so really I'll jump around just a little bit. Obviously the ranged piece is going to be a big piece here. I'm using a targeted buff gauntlets. You can farm these pretty easily from the corrupted vibranium pieces. Even specifically because it's Black Panther, you don't even need to do it in the missions. You can actually just go right to the very first mission in the Black Panther story and farm it there. So this piece is not perfect, but you'll see their precision, intensity, that's totally fine. Good roll there. Targeted buff, gotta have it, right? Hitting an enemy with a range crit grants a damage buff, gotta have it. It's fantastic. Range attacks with devastating daggers deal Sonic. This is money. I wouldn't recommend switching this out for any other skill, at least not in this build. If you absolutely were to put a gun to my head, I'd probably say you could get away with Gamma, or you could get away with Plasma, but I would not recommend either of those. I would recommend Sonic. Sonic is so good. and it's going to help you recharge all your abilities and your teammates as well. Don't forget that, right? So you're going to be, it's definitely a little bit of a support build as well. Now the bottom perk there, expert buff, defeating an enemy with a ranged attack also grants a damage buff. That's a little redundant, unfortunately. This is not the absolute perfect roll, but it's the best one I've got right now. If I could cherry pick the perfect piece here, that bottom slot would have a chance on defeating an enemy to give a heroic charge burst. That would be very nice. Or also a defense buff. That would be nice as well. Or even Jarvis Barrier might be good too. But anything other than damage buff, because it's redundant with the targeted buff on the first perk. But definitely look out for a piece that has at least the first two perks, and then whatever you get in the third one is just gravy. All right, so coming over to the melee piece now, you know, normally in range builds, your melee piece is kind of just a stat stick, and that's the case here too. You'll see I happen to get Precision and Valor. Those are our two primary stats for this piece, so a great piece there. You definitely also want to look out for a couple of things. So Dagger's Magnifier, that piece is huge. 15% increased status damage from dagger attacks, right? So obviously that's going to affect our sonic damage coming from our devastating daggers, right? So we're going to be spreading that sonic 15% faster. That's a really nice thing to have, especially on your melee piece affecting your ranged there. So, and then the other thing that's actually kind of crazy that this rolled with is Faultless Empowerment. Now, this actually, I was actually kind of taken aback. I didn't even realize it worked this way until I started testing this build. But it's a chance melee crits grant an intrinsic burst. Now, here's the thing. We're not actually meleeing with this build, but we get intrinsic burst all the time, and you'll see it in the gameplay as well. And the reason for that is because takedowns count as melee. Okay, so if we have our damage buff from targeted buff, right, everything we're going to be doing is a crit anyway for the most part. It's very likely that everything's a crit, okay? And then when we're going to be building stun bars and doing tons and tons of takedowns, well, anytime one of those takedowns is a crit, which they probably will be, we got a 50% chance of getting an intrinsic burst. That's absolutely insane. It's absolutely money on this build, okay? We're going to be getting, you'll see in the gameplay clips, intrinsic burst is up nonstop. We're going to be getting our intrinsic back all the time. All right, coming to the chest piece here. So I'm using a reactive protection. You don't have to use this. It's not the perfect roll. I kind of needed, I really wanted to get something that had defense buff. Unfortunately, I really don't have a better piece than this. Obviously, the Nahanda's is nerfed. The Battle Guard of the Ancestors is not great on this build. It's great on most Black Panther builds, but not this one because we're not really doing any intrinsic attacks. Okay, so we're not really going to get, much use out of the Untouchable Beans or the Panther's Effector. The Percussive Blast, it can work, but honestly, just not really worth it. So you could also you could use a reactive buff, but it's not as worth it because you're probably already going to get damage buff from your targeted buff. So I recommend a reactive protection. Taking damage grants a defense buff. I would try to, of course, get this with Precision, Valor, Resolve, the big three, right? But, take what you can kind of get. If you also, another good piece to have here is reactive Jarvis Barrier. That's a money perk as well. You can get that from the 14th floor Hive. But this is what I'm going with for now. It works absolutely fine. Like I said, the build's a little squishy, so if I could cherry pick a perfect piece here, it would be a Resolve, maybe even Resolve Resilience, but definitely like Valor Resolve Resilience or Valor Resolve Precision piece with either reactive protection or reactive Jarvis Barrier. That'll give this build a little more of the tankiness that'll really help it out. And then the last piece here, I'm using Legacy of the Ancestor. This is a money piece as well. Now, it's funny, I'm actually using the exotic version. It's not as good for this build as the legendary version, but this piece just happened to roll with much better stats than any legendary version I have. So you'll see there Precision, Resolve, obviously two big ones for us. The Bass Chosen amplification, that's money. The increased duration of Bass Chosen, that's money. We're going to have Bass Chosen up all the time, so you don't even have to worry about it. The Percussive Blast Resilience or Resistance, melee attacks regenerate willpower, so that's not really useful for us. It does work on our takedowns, like I said, but not really super useful. If I could again cherry pick the perfect piece, it would be another one of these kind of prayers of the ancestor, possibly something like this one here, right? Where it's the same 2 top perks, but then the bottom perk is maybe 3 enemies for a defense buff, possibly 3 enemies for a heroic charge burst. Something like that would be really nice. But unfortunately, I'd like it to roll with precision and resolve. You can see here, these are valor precision. So, I mean, I could equip these and really put my offensive stats to the moon, but I mean, you'll notice if I do, the defense goes absolutely to shit. So, I mean, if you're godlike and you're never going to get hit, then by all means go for this. But good luck, you know, in harder content with 800 defense rating. So I'm going with the exotic version just for now. If I get a better perk, I'll update the build. But that's pretty much it. And then over here, I'm using 2 yellow ISOs. All right, so that's, of course, Valor, right? So we're going to go high on the Valor. That's going to help us with our heroics, all right? And then I'm using the Ring of Nebelung. Of course, you'll see in the gameplay, we're doing takedowns non-stop, right? It's a Valor build, so we want to be activating our heroic abilities, getting the most out of them. So when we're stunning, we're getting orbs, we're using our heroics. What works well with that? Of course, the Ring of Nebelung, right? So we're going to get our heroics back faster. It's a no-brainer. That's absolutely what we're going to be using for the build. And then, of course, for the outfit, you have to be using the Black Panther MCU skin. And for the emote, you have to be using the Wakanda Forever. There's really no other option there. So that's it for the gear. We're going to go through the skills right now. All right, boys, so here we are with the specialty tree for Black Panther. Now, starting with the support heroic, I actually like Kimoyo Blast for this one. The reason being, obviously, as a Valor build, we want to do damage with our abilities here, and the Kimoyo Blast basically makes it so your recovery beads give you an offensive capability. So, of course, you could just go pure Kimoyo beads, and then you'll be getting, but for the most part, these only really do stun. And I know we are a stun build, but we're not going to have any trouble stunning people with your devastating daggers. People are going to get stunned nonstop. So I actually really like this. I think it's the best balance for, you know, fairly safe gameplay. Recovery beads, in my opinion, are one of the better healing pieces in this game. They're really, really strong. They're maybe not quite as strong as Kamala's Team Spirit, but extremely powerful. And when you use it like this, you're really getting like kind of the best of both worlds, right? You'll get the recovery beads, but you'll also get a little damage out of it as well. And of course, that will scale with your Valor. So this is the one I go for. And then you'll see in the gameplay, I use recovery beads pretty often. Again, it's a little bit of a squishy build, so the recovery beads definitely help with that. All right, then I use Shadow Physics. This one's a no-brainer. Increase the duration by 10 seconds. Of course, that's absolutely money. This is going to help us keep this up pretty much at all times. Coming over to the Assault Heroics, so I actually like to use Immovable Object. So you'll see, you know, with some of the skills we've got in the other trees, why this I think is best. A lot of people use the 3 times spear, but I don't think this is really necessary. I think just going with the 1 big spear is good. And, you know, we're going to be obviously getting a lot of heroic orbs getting this off cooldown. So we're really just going to be, using this pretty much every time it's off cooldown. So I'd rather just have a bigger spear that's more powerful, right, and can pin more enemies than have 3 little ones, because we don't really need to charge them up. We're just going to be spamming them anyway, all right? So then on that note, I'm going to be using Plentiful Harvest. Right? Enemies defeated by the spear have a 10% chance to drop a heroic orb. So really what you want to do, and you'll see in the gameplay, just try to line guys up, right? Line up as many people as you can and try to target the smallest guys you can with this, right? Because odds are the small guys, especially if you have a damage buff, and of course we're playing high Valor here, you're going to kill small guys with this, right? And even, you know, even if it's upon pinning them, but then they're going to have that 10% chance to drop a heroic orb. So 10% is not the highest chance, but every so often, I mean, if you pin, a couple of guys, this can obviously hit a ton of guys in its path. If you're killing guys, I mean, you can usually get at least 1 orb per throw out of this. So I think this is worth it. I think it's better than the other 2. So this is the one I go with. And then coming over to the ultimate. Now I'm using Adorned Ones. I think this works in this case. I wouldn't normally use this, but because it's a high Valor build, the 2 summon spectral Wakandan warriors actually do quite a bit of damage. They do actually help out quite a bit, and they're kind of kind of a distraction for enemies, right? They'll kind of get in enemies' faces. Enemies will actually try to attack them, and they'll kind of stagger enemies too. So this is actually a little more useful than just pure damage, especially because we're a little squishier. It's nice to have a few Wakandan warriors kind of, drawing away some of that enemy attention. But honestly, I mean, the other thing too is, we can get this ability off of cooldown so much. It's not uncommon for us to have 4 or even 6 of these guys out at any one point. So that works really, really well. And I think it's better than the other two. The Panther's Roar is the other really nice one, but I don't think it's necessary. And then we don't really care to be bringing back from the dead. And then over here, I'm using Ancestral Memory. So again, just because this is a Valor build, I think this works pretty well. And of course, we've got a lot of ways to get our intrinsic back. This is a sonic damage based build, so that's going to be building our intrinsic. And we do have intrinsic on pretty much, basically get an intrinsic burst for every takedown we do. So that's pretty nice. So definitely we will have our overcharge bar filled up pretty regularly. So being able to use Percussive Blast and getting that extra damage while we're in our super, of course we're going to be in our super quite a bit as well. Scale with Valor, it's really, really good. So that's it for the specialty tree. Coming over to the mastery tree, a lot of these will do absolutely nothing. So I'll just point out the ones that do nothing. I won't waste your time. So this one does nothing. This one does nothing. This one is important. You got to have the heroic spirit. Takedowns grant a heroic orb. Obviously, you should have this on every character. This is a staple across all of my builds. So definitely go with that one. For the ranged, obviously you want Final Flourish, because that one affects devastating daggers. Armor Piercing affects devastating daggers. And then I actually go with Oxford Graduate, increases the stun damage of weak point attacks. I think that's probably the best one. You can go with crit attack damage from all daggers by 10%. We will be doing a lot of crits, but honestly 10% of a damage boost is so little. And it's only on your crits, so even though that's, can come up pretty often, it's not a lot of damage whatsoever. And then this one's okay. It's a little hard to gauge like how good it is. So this makes it so that on your final throw, the 3 dagger spread, it has a better chance of like interrupting enemies, kind of knocking them back, staggering them a little bit. I mean, it's hard to kind of measure this one, so I think the easiest one to go with is stun damage. Again, we're going to be stunning guys so much, so a little extra stun damage can't hurt. Coming over here, so Kinetic Armor, this is the only one in this tree that is valuable. The other two don't do anything for us, so this makes it so that if our bar is full to the top, we'll get 10% damage reduction. So pretty nice to have. Definitely one you'll want to go with. Coming over here, Last Panther Standing. Again, this one is the only one that does anything. We don't do any intrinsic attacks, so none of these other ones really do anything for us. But this just makes it that, if we do run out of energy, the minimum amount that the suit will refill to is a little bit higher. It doesn't come up often, but like I said, it's the only thing that even slightly matters in this particular column. And then this one doesn't matter at all. Now, Danger in the Wind. So this one, I went back and forth on this one. I decided to go with the increased damage from the Percussive Blast by 15%. You could also make a case for the stun damage by 20%, but I find that it doesn't really do a lot of stun damage anyway. What really does most of our stun damage are 2 things. One would be the devastating daggers, of course, that's our primary one, and then your support heroic if you don't care to use the recovery beads, if you decide you're going to throw one out that's more offensive, that one also does a lot of stun. So those are our 2 main sources of stun. I don't think that it's really necessary to also have it on the Percussive Blast. And remember that we are also using the Ancestral Memory, so it scales with our Valor, and it's a heroic attack. Of course, we're high Valor, so I think just going pure damage on that is the best way to go. Right, crit attack damage and chance of 10% while overcharged. This is great. Of course, we're going to be in that Percussive Blast pretty regularly because we got our intrinsic back pretty quick. So just an extra 10%. Like I said, I know from a damage perspective, I just said 10% isn't that much, but the 10% crit hit chance is actually quite a bit. So this one's a good one to have. And then coming over here, Nation's Hero, chance when defeating an enemy while you're in that percussive blast, 10% chance to drop a heroic orb. So again, 10% not often, but we're going to be in that overcharge pretty much all the time. So it's going to be like a 10% across the board on any kill to grant a heroic orb. So that's really it. That's the build, guys. For your champion, I mean, you really don't have to go with anything different than any other build. The main ones to prioritize are crit damage, crit chance, heroic charge rate, and then perk chance. Not because they're specific to this build, but just because they're the only champion boosts that actually are worth a damn across any build. So those are the ones to prioritize. But that's it, guys. It's a sweet build. It's really, really fun. Enjoy the gameplay. Be sure to like and follow for more, and I'll see you guys in the next one.